Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Mosaic Podcast. I love this show. And I'll tell you why I love this show, because it gives me an opportunity to introduce you to people that have been so meaningful in my life. Some of them I've met like moments before the podcast starts. And some of them I have the honor to work with and have them mentor me and help me. Today's guest, Sarah McCrum, is someone that I can honestly say in a very short period of time is completely changing the perceptions that I've had around something that has really troubled me for the last 5 years of my life. All of my life, I have had such a beautiful, simple, easy, respectful relationship to money. It's never been a difficult thing. It was always there in abundance. In fact, I had it and I gave it away because I never thought that I would need it. So I just got big portions of money and I would give it to poor people. And I just believe so much in the simplicity of flow and need and grace that every time I knew I would need it, it would be there for me. Until one day when my business that I was involved in turned left when it should have turned right. The manufacturer that I was working with told me 3 days before my orders were due that he hadn't made a thing and he was going out of business. And I lost $300,000 because the money from those orders was going to pay off the expenses that were going in there and make money. And that leveled me. From that moment on, if you know the Mosaic, the book, that was my pothole. I drove into that little pothole and I said, oh my God, this is now my life. I forgot all this time that money was effortless and simple because I just had this beautiful relationship with it. And now I saw that it was something that was taken from me. It hurt me. It was not good. So when I bumped into Sarah through a friend of mine, and it seems like that's the way her work spreads. One person to another person to another person. And so I want you to keep your ears open, because I may just be that person spreading her to you, and you might just be that person that's spreading her out to a world that we don't even know exists. She started to work with me on belief systems and started to work with me on realities that exist. And all this thought of how hard it was now to make money just disappearing into this fact that money's right in front of me. It's not hard. I'm going to let her say it better than me. You know me, I'm not a big bio person. I do want to give you a little bit of a flavor for her. But I want you to be able to go to her website, which is www.sarahmccrum.com. And we'll have those spelled out in the show notes. You won't have to worry. She also has another website, which is sarahmccrum.com, The Energy of Money. And she also has her book, Love Money, Money Loves You, which is available on Amazon. Plus, she has tons of courses and tons of these beautiful things called transformances. And those transformances are just ecstatically beautiful and powerful ways for you to transform your consciousness. Here's what she says about herself, and we'll go into this a little bit. Take one human being, add a Cambridge University education and 10 years in BBC radio, mix in 22 years of training with Chinese masters, then combine with a lot of common sense, diverse life experiences, and a passion for inspiring leaders. The result is Sarah McCrum. And she's different than anything that you've ever experienced before. I feel like I'm giving a monologue, and I don't want this to be a monologue, so I'm going to stop right now. I'm going to say, Sarah, welcome. It's my absolute honor and privilege to be working with you and to introduce you to my family, the Mosaic family. Welcome to the Mosaic Podcast.
Thank you, Danny. I think I am part of the Mosaic family, so I'm happy to be welcomed in here.
Absolutely, you're part of it. You're certainly, we are so connected and so beautiful. I love the fact that we can meet a stranger and feel so connected to each other, so amazing. And some people would call that coincidence. I call that just the beauty of connection, the beauty of the reality of knowing we're more deeply connected than we ever thought.
It's
Let's
actually really the beauty at one level of the energy that is behind money. It's the very energy that we're talking about that has connected us in the first place, because there was something you needed, you were calling out for, you were asking for, and I became part of the solution to that. And there are these huge energy systems that sit behind life that connect those things together. So actually we've dived right into the middle of the topic before we even started.
Right, before I even said hello. But I love that, because one of the things that I always say, and you're clear proof to me of that, is that everything we need is one connection away, one person away, one thought away, one introduction away. And the life that we're living right now is it's completely possible that everything will change by just meeting that one person or having that one connection or allowing something to happen. So let's backtrack a little, because we're going to get into it. I know we're going to get into it, and I love where we're going to go. I always ask this question, and it seems to be interesting to me to see how it opens up the show. Sarah, what did your parents do?
Oh, that came out of the blue.
Yeah, it always
No one
does.
ever asked me that. So my dad was in the Navy. He was a senior officer in the Navy, destined for the top, and didn't actually make it in the end. And my mum is now a successful artist, sculptor. When I was a child, she was wishing she could be an artist, but actually having to be a mum. She probably wouldn't put it quite like that.
And so in their relationship, which one of them did you try to get their attention more than the other? Like, we all want the love of our mom and dad, but was there one person you were trying to please more than the other?
Yeah, my dad, definitely.
Your dad. And so if your dad would look at you now, what would he think?
In his heart, I think he would be really proud of me. And in his head, he would probably wonder how that happened. And it's really funny, because I was just reflecting on this morning, which is something I hardly ever think about. But my mum tells me that he used to take me for little talks when I was a tiny baby. He'd take me down to the bottom of the garden. And she always thought he was saying, oh, don't just ignore that silly woman who's your mother and listen to me. He probably wasn't. But he always used to say things to me that kind of were to make me really special. And the way that my life has developed, there is a specialness about it, in the sense that it's so radically different from what any of my peers have done. And yet it's probably the one thing in the world he could never, ever have predicted.
Wow. And so I bet there are people listening now who feel that same sort of sense of the way their life is shaped up is so different than the way the people around them have shaped up. Some of them have the courage to walk that way, and some of them are like wondering, like, how do they make peace with that? Because maybe, what would you say to someone who is in that brink, who is starting to see that the world that they live in, it isn't a bad world, it's a great world, but it just doesn't resonate as much as the world that they see over here?
I think the really important thing when you're in that situation is to recognize, just like we've already said, that what you need to shift, maybe gradually, sometimes more quickly, into a more fulfilling life or more purposeful work, whatever it is that you see on the other side, is to recognize that what you need is actually here already. So what I find, I often teach people these days, this has been quite new, about their soul's purpose. And one of the things that's extraordinary when we connect in and figure out what that is that it's usually something really simple, like sharing love and creating peace, things that you can do today and tomorrow. You can do in a horrible job, and you can do them in the best job in the world. You can do them if you're the person you want to be, or also if you're the person you don't really want to be at the moment. So the really important things in life, the things we really care about, there's two interesting things. One is we can always do them now, and the other is they become the bridge to creating a better life. So what we often think is, if only I can get there, do that job, create that business, be in that situation, then I'll be happy. If you can actually give yourself to be happy now, it becomes a great deal easier to change the job, get the business, and change your life.
So from your experience, why do you think people do that? Because it makes so much sense to say, well, I just want to be happy now. Why don't I just, like, why is there, if I could, or if that were, or if this were different, or if that happened, then I'd be happy, rather than I'm just going to be happy now with whatever it is.
Well, were you ever taught that if you work hard, you'll get these results,
Of
which will
course,
get
my
you to
dad.
that university, that will get you to that job, that will get you to that success, that will get you to that wife and children, that will get you to that perfect live happily ever after, ha ha.
Yeah, it's
So I think we were
interesting.
primed with it from childhood. And our parents also were often under pressure to find the right school so my children will become successful, so my children will be happy one day.
Yeah. I had a very interesting upbringing because my mom was more of a wannabe. She always wanted to have more. And my dad could care less about money. He wanted to just love people and take care of people. And so he died with a mountain of debt and one black suit. And my mom was always just like shattered that we weren't more, because her sister had married someone who was a household name. And so I think she was always sort of jealous and comparing, and and when my parents passed away, I went to live with those people that I didn't even know. So there, for me, the transference from a lower middle class family where we had a lot of debt to an elite upper class world renowned family was effortless. It was just took the death of my parents in a plane flight,
Yes.
and suddenly I was there. So I never had that thought that I had to work that hard. My uncle said, we're going to start you at the bottom and work your way up, but you'll do that. So it's interesting. Like, I get that we create those stories, but one of the things that incredibly interests me, and you had, I mean, from what I understand of your background, you came upon what you're doing through a business venture that you were doing that then went south, and you picked up a book. Tell us a little bit about what happened.
Well, I actually had been training already for quite a long time with Chinese masters. I had two Chinese masters in my life. And by the time that particular story happened, which I'll explain a bit more in a minute, I'd already done something like 20 years of
Wow.
training. So my life had taken a totally different direction when I was 30, because my sister died. She died of a brain tumor.
Wow.
And you know very well how those
Yes.
unexpected deaths just completely changed the direction and the orientation of your life, because suddenly I realized that happiness wasn't guaranteed. Not that I was particularly happy, but I didn't really question it before that. I also realized, this was very significant for me, that health is not guaranteed and doctors don't guarantee health.
Yeah.
They would love to, but they couldn't. And so that somewhere inside me sort of reshaped itself into this searching for answers about health and happiness and life, combined with other things that were going on in my life at the same time. So that took me on a completely different path from there on, really delving into Chinese metaphysics, Chinese understanding of energy and health and well-being in tremendous depth.
Yeah.
And
And
then there was the business failure, which led me to find a little book, and this is a story I tell in many places, which the book asked me the question, what does money want to say to you? And I then had an experience of literally automatically writing an answer to that question, where money started to speak to me about what it really is and its true nature. And that then became a book and my learning about money.
yeah. And I love that with it, because without even knowing that part about you, we got connected. And the mosaic for me was all around, what would we hear if we could hear what we don't hear? What would we see if we could see what we don't see? Like, most parents passed away. In my book, they passed away, and the adults told him to go find that they were in heaven. So he went off to search for heaven, right? But the people he met were not the people that you would think would be heaven. So he was wondering, why am I sitting with these people? And yet when he sat with them and listened to them, they told him their story, and they suddenly became completely different people. And he saw that when he saw them for what they were after hearing their story, they were completely different. And I love that you have the experience. How, when money first came to you, or that book first came to you and said to you, what would money say to you if it could speak? How did that land with you? Because I bet there's some people listening here saying, what do you mean money speaks? Like, right? Like, what do you, do you have like a van outside of crazy that's going to take you to the insane asylum? Like, because that's what happens for me when I say to people, like, everything in the world has a voice, like if you could listen to it. But how did that first land on you?
I think that at the time it was one in a string of questions, and I had just had an extremely painful business failure. So I had a lot of time on my hands because we had worked 7 days a week for years. And at that point, I had nothing to do. I couldn't even afford the apartment that I was sitting in. And so I think that I kind of took it like, well, I'm just going to do these exercises, because it was not even a book I would normally read. It was called How to Be a Money Magnet. And I was always rather superior, I think, about books like that. I thought I was way beyond it.
Right.
So I just kind of like, I think I just put my pen down, probably thought that's a bit of a funny question, but didn't think much of it. And to be fair, I had had some experiences before, never writing, but of being able to connect with certain kinds of energy and sort of tune in and receive messages, let's say. So I was already in that crazy camp
Yeah.
anyway. And I'd also trained with teachers who could do that kind of thing. So it was familiar territory for me. Although
Yeah.
people do often say, I just don't get it, that money can talk to you or that you could have a relationship with money, because for them money is just notes, coins, numbers, transactions.
Yeah. And so why, I'm asking you things that I love already, because that's the relationship I have with the world around me. But I'm sure there are people that are listening that say, why is it so important? I mean, like, it's just the thing you use to buy your purchases. Why is it so important that you hear the voice of what money wants from you?
Well, that is a really good question. First of all, why is it so important? If you think about it, most of the problems that we deal with today, whether they're personal problems or they're global or anything in between, if you delve down a little bit, you'll find that money appears to be implicated in those problems. So usually when there's trouble around money in a relationship, that's when the relationship is extremely fragile, and there can be a lot more fighting. The same thing happens across the world. And we are pretty familiar now with the idea that whether it's greed or manipulation or whatever it is, this is the story of today about why we have wars in the world, why we have problems with pollution. It's all about money, it's all about greed, it's about capitalism, it's about profit. We've got different reasons for it, but money is implicated in all of those. Now, the very first thing that money said to me was, I would like to tell you to love me.
Hmm.
And it went on to say things like, I am energy, I am beautiful, I am not the devil, and I never have been. And it
And
said,
pause for a minute. Was that a surprise to you that the first thing money would say to you was, I want you to love me?
oh, totally, totally. I wrote for about 2 pages, not unconscious, but just writing. My pen was literally, it was like my pen was taken over, and I'd never had that experience. And so I was watching words come out of the end of the pen, and it didn't fully grasp, I didn't fully grasp what I was writing as I wrote it, but I read it back afterwards, and I mean, it melted my heart in an instant, as it does for most
Yeah.
people when they hear it, because you hear this voice of something that plays such a powerful role in our life, and it's saying, love me, take me, play with me, I'm here, just ask for me, I'm here, I'm waiting for you, you don't need to wait, just take me. You know, it's like offering itself like a lover almost, but with this simplicity and innocence and beauty. And I had never ever, in all my work about energy, in everything I'd learned, it had never occurred to me that money is it's like an affair of the heart. It's
Yeah.
not an affair of the mind like we've made it.
And I know in our work together, you played a short, like 3-4 minute verse of money speaking to you, and you recorded it and put music behind it and what it said to you. And it was so moving to me, because when you see money not as just coins and dollars and paper, but as a living, breathing entity, it has its power and it has its vulnerability as well.
Would you like me to play it here?
I would love that. Why don't? Can you get it easily?
Yeah, I can get it easily. You just need to mute, and I'll mute as well, so we don't
Okay,
put any extra sound in there.
perfect.
This is what money would like to say to you. I would like to tell you to love me. Smile at me. Collect me. Enjoy me. Feel my power. Spend me. Invest me. Give me. Pay with me. Take me. I am an energy. I'm very powerful and beautiful. I'm an incredible web of connections. I am light. You're too afraid of me, as you are of many things. You can open up and embrace me fully into your life. It's not too late. You can start now. Just open yourself and say yes. Be brave. Love me. Love yourself so you can accept my power, my glory, my light, my beauty. I'm not the devil. I never have been. I'm a glorious being of light. I connect human beings with each other. I'm so flexible. You can use me to channel your creativity. Just go ahead. I'm waiting for you. You must open your heart. You're too rigid, too afraid, and there's nothing to be afraid of. You will win not only me, but life also. I'm always here to help you. Just accept me, and I'll come to you very quickly. You've chosen to have more. There's a lot of me waiting for you. Don't wait, just take me. I will love you.
Wow. Wow. I'm going to ask our listeners, you now have that available to you, to just come back to this podcast, come back to this place and just listen to that as often as you wish to. Because like I try and be the voice of you when I'm talking to the guests that I talk to, not the voice of Sarah, the voice of the listener, right? And I find the voice of the listener is sometimes skeptical, and it would think, well, oh, what's that mean? She's automatically writing, and what's that mean? And do I have to be a part of some sort of cult to do this? But then when you listen to how simple and beautiful and loving and caring and romantic and passionate and seductive and powerful the conversation with money could be, can you imagine if you would just start to talk with it? If you would just befriend it as you do your best friend. I love what you're doing, Sarah, and I'm honored on this globe that spins at 160,000 miles an hour with 8 billion people on it. Somehow we found each other. And I hope that through me, you'll find many other voices here.
Seems like it's starting.
It is starting for sure. What's the hardest thing for you about what you do?
The hardest thing for me is that some people have such a challenging relationship with money that it takes them quite a long time to transform it. Some people get very fast results. Some people get some very nice quick wins, and then later there's much deeper work to be done. But I really feel for the people who struggle with it. And some of that, of course, is natural, you know, and some of it is actually because most of what I've learned that is meaningful to me, I was not the fast one. So I was always number one at school. I was top in everything. But when I started learning about energy, I was suddenly the worst in the class quite often, at least as far as I could make out. And I struggled with it so much because I was so heady and so pent up, and I was very limited in my emotional expression, for example. And I feel the pain of people who watch other people getting amazing results and they sit there and think, why isn't it happening to me? And all I can say is that, yeah, I had a lot of persistence. You probably won't have to go through what I went through, but even if you did, it is so worth it, because as it does start working for you, it's like the sun coming out in your life in an area where you may have really felt hopeless, or just that perhaps there was something wrong with you. Perhaps I used to believe there was something wrong with me, that I was born the wrong way. And, you know, it was like a mistake had been made from the very beginning. I think a lot of us feel like that. And to start to really know in your heart that that's not the case,
Yeah.
that I would wish for anybody and everybody.
The beauty of when you speak, and the beauty of even just what we just listened to, is that even though the conversation seems to be just around money, the principles seem to be about every aspect of your life. And when you get your situation together with money, I think I heard you say at one point, the way you experience love is the way you'll experience money. Is that something that you said, or was that a misperception of me?
I often ask people when I first meet them, I play that recording, and then if I'm teaching, for example, then I ask them to look at their relationship with money and see what kind of relationship they have. And people often report to me, oh, it's like a stranger, or it's like a neighbor I've never invited to dinner. I hear all these stories.
Yeah.
But what's really fascinating is when they go a little deeper, they realize, oh my goodness, I have the same problems in my relationship with money as I have in my relationship with my wife or my partner.
Yeah.
And the same qualities, also the good bits, are the same. And so we start to realize that the way we relate with money, the way we relate with people, and the way we relate with life, which is really significant, seems to have certain patterns. And so by opening up any of those, you can start to open up the others at the same time.
Yeah, they have a saying in Zen that says the way you do anything is the way you do everything,
Yeah,
right? And
that's it.
I love that. They also tell a story. I'm a storyteller, as you know. They tell a story about a teacher who had his disciples gathered around him, and he said, "I want to let you know today that when you will all be liberated." And he went around the room and he said to them, one of them, he said, "You're going to find liberation this lifetime." And the next one said, "It's going to take you 5 lifetimes." And you could see they were diminished and crushed. And the next one, he said, "It's going to take you 100 lifetimes." And he was like just sitting there thinking, "Oh my God, he went to his foremost disciple, the one that was closest to him than anybody. And he said, "My beloved friend, it will take you 100,000 lifetimes to find liberation." And that disciple started, and the other disciples were like aghast. They were like, "How is that possible? This is the best. This is his closest disciple." And they felt so bad for him. And they were in a pity party until they looked over and he was singing and dancing in the corner and just saying, and they went over to him and they said, "What are you doing? Didn't you hear what the master said? The master said it's going to be 100,000 lifetimes." And he said, "Yes, I know. Didn't you hear what he said? In 100,000 lifetimes, I will be liberated." I mean, that's nothing. He said, "I'm going to be liberated." And the master went over to him and tapped him on the forehead and said, "I want you to just see what a real disciple is. When you are ready and willing to accept whatever comes, that's when you're ready to have whatever comes." And I just somehow feel that in the story of money, at least in my story of money, that genuine gratitude and that genuine acceptance and that genuine not getting in the way or fighting or resisting it will be all that bring, because it's right there,
Yeah, it's right here. It is all
right
around
here.
us, and often when people are looking for money, it is very close. It's right in front of them, and they're often looking somewhere else and making it much more complicated than it needs to be. But that's, it's easy to say that that's you actually need to learn. I had to learn from money, from this dialogue I had with money, from the book that I wrote. I actually had to learn how simple it is. And I constantly marvel, actually, because when I wrote it, it didn't mean that I could do it. When I
Yes.
wrote it, I had no money. When I finished writing it, I still had no money. I actually had to go and learn. So this is the other thing that I often reflect on. I wish I could just give you the book and then boom, it happens. I've had people who've got remarkable results from reading the book, remarkable. But this is a relationship. That's like saying, well, I can just wave a magic wand over your marriage and you're going to have a perfect relationship for the rest of your life. That's not what relationship is. Relationship is about relating, and it's something that happens over time. And so I think it's the story of how we unfold and grow that relationship for the rest of our life and many lives to come.
Yeah.
That's actually where it's really happening.
So just for those who are tuning in and don't quite know what's going on, I just want to make sure I get the name of Sarah's book, and that I want you to tell you that it's available on Amazon or wherever books are sold. The book is called Love Money, Money Loves You. It's right here. It is a fabulous, fabulous book that will literally change your dialogue for sure, because I don't think most of us have a dialogue. It will initiate a dialogue and change the dialogue. And so as you were writing this, what came to you? What sort of thoughts came to you? Because the part of you that I know is that you can work with financial advisors, you can work with stockbrokers, you can work with people that have tons of money but don't have fulfillment, but you can also work with people who dedicated their life to fulfillment but don't have any money. And so what I don't want people to get from this is you have to be sort of a new agey sort of person, because some of the concepts sound new agey.
Yeah.
And it doesn't seem like that, even though you studied energy, it didn't seem like that was where you were, because some of these concepts, as much as they were familiar to you, were hard for you to grasp. Like, what does that mean? Or maybe they weren't hard for you to grasp, but it took time for you to get. What do you say to the person who's out there listening that says, I just have a broken relationship with money. What can I do to heal that?
Usually I play them the first chapter of the book because that instantly, it activates something inside. It seems to cut through the doubts and the skepticism and the cynicism that sit in the way. And I think that given where we are in planetary consciousness at the moment, there is a rapidly expanding openness to concepts that maybe 20 years ago were really scoffed at and looked down on. Not many people, for example, in the business world, it doesn't matter if they're in finance or if they're in investment or if they're in running businesses, can literally say, I've never heard of meditation, I don't know anything about energy, or that's just rubbish. First of all, because there's a lot of science that supports these things now. So for people who feel more secure where there's science, there is science. For people who feel more secure where there's news, there is news. So these social props that help us to verify whether information is correct or not are building the story all the time around us. And therefore, what I find is that outright skepticism and cynicism isn't really the issue. If somebody has a broken relationship with money, because money's so important and because it drives so many of our decisions, especially people I meet who often have family responsibilities. So it's not just about it's very rarely how rich am I? It's, am I able to give my kids everything that I want them to have?
Yeah.
It's really important human things like that are tied up in money. So what I find interestingly is that there is a real curiosity. We have a curiosity to learn about ourselves, to learn about why something's broken, and about how to mend it. And a relationship is at least a relatable thing. We all understand relationship. We all know the word love. We know that love is important, even if we're not good at it. And so for me, if I can speak to the heart of a human being who would like to love their partner more than they do, who would like to be a better partner or a better mum or dad, who would like to have the money to live a life that feels satisfying to them and would like fulfillment in their heart, because how many of us went to schools that promised for you to achieve your great potential? Almost every school promises that.
Yeah.
It's like, this is normal everyday language, and all I'm doing is saying I've been on this rather strange journey of studying things that are not in normal everyday life, because we don't seem to have the answers in everyday life.
Yeah.
The majority of people living an everyday Western life are not particularly fulfilled and don't have a great relationship with money, even if they have lots of it.
Yeah.
So I had to go somewhere else to find different answers, and I can share that with you. That's all.
And I think what I love, like, you have the intellectual capacity to have a relationship with people, to speak about it with them and meet them at the place. Like what you've done for me is, I am smart enough in my own devices to be able to talk my way around going into the place that I have to go into. And you caught me in those places and said, hold it, I'm not really interested in all the ways you're going to dance around. I want to get you into the thing, and I want you to focus. But you also have something through these transformances, which we just heard, which I think we just heard, which is the first chapter of your book of money, that allows people to go beyond the mind and just have an experience of something. And I don't know, when I hear that first chapter, like I just did, and I want to just encourage people to go back and listen to it as much as they possibly can. I'm no longer hearing what you're telling me about something. I'm starting to hear my own experience of how I experienced that experience. And I think that's where you are when you say you're different than anything other people have ever experienced. I want to ask you why. My caveat, I think, is because you give people an experience of that. But I would like to hear why you think you're different than anything anybody's ever experienced.
Partly as a result of the training that I did, what we learned was how to transmit energy. Not because we were taught specifically, but because when you train with Chinese teachers, especially, that's what the Chinese have always specialized in. Not only energy, but this very special transmission. So the actually feel the power of it. It's like the waves float out on the ether, so to speak, and they literally touch you, and you can be the other side of the world as you are now to me, and you feel something. There's a physical and energetic change that takes place in your body, and it's not just because it's beautiful music or beautiful words. There's actually something going on more than that, and that is fairly unusual. Sometimes of course I'm not the only person who can do that, and we all do that to some extent because we're transmitting energy all the time.
Totally.
But a lot of the energy we transmit is mixed. But there's something that happens when you align what you're saying and what you're thinking and what you're feeling and who you're being all into one thing.
Yeah.
The energy of that speaks directly to the energy of another human being. It actually influences the energy of another person. And so it becomes a very different experience from a dinner party conversation.
Yes. And I love that. And a lot of times when I speak to people, I say to them that really, like, allow your mind to get intoxicated with my words, because my words, I can speak beautifully. But the beauty of that intoxication is that it occupies the mind, like Occupy Wall Street. It occupies the mind so that a transmission can happen through heart and spirit that the mind no longer interferes with. And I sort of feel like that's what you do as well. Is there something in the mosaic, I call it the space between the words, that speaks much louder than the words themselves. And if I've done my job well, the space between the words, which isn't my words at all, the words tell a nice story, but the space between the words creates a transformation in people.
So I would say that the words are the packaging of the energy. They're the wrapping paper, if you like. The energy that's contained within the words is what's actually doing the speaking. So for example, a really simple example, if you're in a really bad mood and you try to tell your child to do something, they'll often do exactly the opposite of what you ask them to do, because your words are not aligned with your energy. Your energy is like fraught and difficult and nothing's working for me. And then you say to your child, go and tidy up your room or read this book, but they're picking up the energy of nothing's working for me. So they make everything not work for you. And that's a kind of typical thing. So if your words and your energy are aligned, the words make packaging, beautiful packaging. So you want to open, it's like you want to have a look at what's the energy. So the words are kind of the leading edge of the energy. Now the space between the words is also something. There's energy in the space between the words, but there's also energy in the words.
Yes, I love
behind the words. And for me, I think that's the beauty of communication and the power of conversation. In many ways, I would say that my work is just a conversation. I didn't just talk with money, but I talk with people. When I talk with people, when we talk with each other, things change.
Yeah.
Because when the words and the words and the energy are aligned, my energy changes and your energy changes. When your energy changes, your reality changes.
Yeah.
That's just the way it works.
And when your reality changes, the reality that you're living in really changes, right?
That's what I mean. Yeah,
Yeah, I
it
know.
really is a different
I love
reality.
that.
Yeah.
So what's been your biggest surprise in doing the work you're doing? Like what was the thing that you just went, oh my God, I could never even imagine that was going to happen.
So one thing that has been a huge surprise is that I would never have imagined that working with money would turn out to be the key to living a beautiful life, to personal fulfillment, to joy. Inner peace, maybe I was beginning to experience some of, regardless of the work with money, but it definitely goes along with it. To the deep spiritual things, the things that we search for beyond our material life. I had no idea that money was so deeply enmeshed in every part of our life that when you really engage in a relationship with it, it becomes a pathway. It says in the first chapter, actually, it says, you will win not only me, which is money, but life also. I had no idea what I was writing, but that has proven to be the case. And I just find that phenomenal, because we still tend to think of money as being corrupting and the devil and the root of all evil and whatever your particular religious and spiritual take on it is. And
Yeah, if
it's
you think
so,
about what the Bible says, it says it's easier to pass a camel through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to find God,
yeah,
right? And
yes.
so, I mean, it's infiltrated in every belief system that we have.
Yes, and also the Eastern systems, the height of being a Buddhist is to be a beggar who never touches money. Actually, they make loads of money. I talked to somebody who did that for 10 years the other day. He said money was showered on them all the time. But the point is, our archetype is the begging bowl, the monk, bare feet, more or less, going from house to house, asking for whatever they need. So it doesn't matter whether you look East or West, modern or ancient tradition, we
Yes.
have a very strange relationship with money, non-attachment, all these things. There's truth in all of it, but we have interpreted in such a way that I think it is completely messed with our natural systems, and we no longer have a natural relationship with money. And that is why we don't have a natural relationship with life, with the planet, with each other,
Yeah.
because it's all part and parcel of the same mentality.
It's all connected. In my
Yeah.
language of mosaic, it's all pieces that are connected to each other that we're trying to separate out and say they're not. So, and I find it so interesting, and we've had this discussion, but I just want to point it out here and get your thoughts on it, that so many people that are spiritual, that are living a life dedicated to finding God, don't have 2 cents to put together to buy themselves a meal or to do the things they want to do. And so many of the people that are dedicated to finding money find the money, but don't have the fulfillment that they seek behind that money. And so, like, it seems like it's perfectly suited for you and the work that you're doing right now to marry those people together, to say it's not one or the other, it's one and the other. And how simple that would be if we would just dialogue with it and just say, how do I bring money into my spiritual life, and how do I bring my spiritual life into my money? Or how does that question shape itself for you?
For me, it's really about giving people permission to want what they actually want, and to know that that's legitimate, and that there's no guilt, there's no shame in wanting abundance. Most people, it's not pure money that they want, but they want that feeling of richness in their life.
Yeah.
And that richness, that abundance and fulfillment doesn't come through one way or the other. It comes through this marriage. That's the whole point. It's that uniting of the material and the non-material, if you like,
Yes.
that enables it. So yes, for me, I feel like my job is to show that it's safe. It is actually safe, that if you're making money and you're wealthy, it is safe to explore fulfillment, and you don't have to lose all of your money in order to become that camel instead of the rich man. And that if you're into spirituality or religion or whatever way you're looking for personal fulfillment, or to be a good person, to live a good life, that it is absolutely legitimate. In fact, not only legitimate, it makes sense at every level to bring money into that, and
Yeah.
that it is not a cause for guilt or shame or self-judgment or any of the things that people torture themselves with at the moment. There is a natural marriage there once you understand what money is. If you don't understand that money is an energy of love, unconditional love, I don't think it is ever possible to reconcile those two.
So if you would take away all the veils that people have put around money and the definitions that they've given it, is it what you just said it is, that it's just a manifestation of love? What would you say from what you've learned so far?
Money, it is an expression of love, or a manifestation. It's an energy of love. It is the energy that fulfills human requests. We ask for things in our hearts, in our souls, just inside ourselves. We have wishes, natural wishes and desires. Some of them are for things, experiences, things we want to give, all kinds of wishes. Money is the energy that fulfills those wishes,
Love it.
literally.
Love it. I want to be sensitive to our time, because we could talk forever, and we do. We carry this on later between us. Um, I end the podcast always asking the same question, And I have a feeling that there'll be an interesting slant on that question through our conversation. And that question is, when you look out the window at the world that exists today, is it the world you always dreamed of handing over to your children and your children's children, or to future generations if you don't have children? Is this the world you always dreamed you would want to give over? If so, why? And if not, what's one of the things you would like to change, and how would you go about doing that?
If I give you a really, really honest answer to that question, I would actually, hard as it is, have to say, yes, it is the world.
Yeah.
Not because I think the world is in a beautiful shape, but because the very problems that I see are exactly what's calling us into a relationship. This is not just our relationship with money, but into a relationship with ourselves and each other and life that allows us to really recognize, A, that the world is never done, and that we are in this constant process of becoming more creative, becoming more powerful, of having wishes and having responses to them. And so it feels to me like I was born into the right life. You were born into the right life. I wasn't supposed to be born into some heaven where it was all fixed already. Actually, we're made for this. And the people who are alive now are made for this world. And we can answer the call, but we do actually need to, that's not a lazy thing, and it can't be done through apathy. That the opportunity for us to become more conscious and therefore to become way more fulfilled in our lives is very present. And I find that exquisitely beautiful, actually.
Yeah. And so for people that hear you now and go, yeah, I get that, what would you recommend as the one thing they could do to sort of get out of the inertia? Because it's easy to say that. It's easy to say we're perfectly placed in a world where we can, make it better. But as we watch the world get harder and harder to live in, what would be the one thing you would recommend people do, whatever that would be? Is it around money? Is it around consciousness? Is it around?
I actually think that it is. I personally have come to the conclusion that we must resolve our conflict, our deep internal conflict around money, if we want to resolve the issues that we're facing. Because money seems to be implicated in almost everything, and I recognize that it's not money's fault, it's what we do with it. But that's about our relationship with it. So I do actually think the advice you've given through this podcast, listen to the first chapter again. I always say that everything you need to know is actually in that chapter. So actually just listen to that message and get to grips with, what if that is true? What if that is actually what money is, more than what I've thought before? How would that change the way that I live? How would that change the decisions I make? How would that change the way I relate with my work, with my family, with all the things that I do? And that is a way in to what happens when you do that, as you go deeper and deeper and deeper into it, is that you start to discover the deep creativity of being human. And as that unlocks for you, and it takes time, you start to become part of the solution rather than an observer of the problem.
For people who want to, and I can't imagine anybody won't, but for people who are already intoxicated with you and want to come to the bottle and drink more, so to speak, of the intoxication that you give, where can they find you, and how would they go about, like, what's the first step that you would suggest people take? Is it the book? Is it a course that you have? Like, what would be the first place you would
The best thing I would do would be to listen to the audiobook. If you're not an audiobook person, read the book, Love Money, Money Loves You. But the audiobook gives you a more direct transmission. I would start there. If you want more from there, then you just come to my website, sarahmccrum.com, and whatever, you'll be able to find your next step there. And if it's not apparent, you send me an email.
Perfect. Sarah, I normally take a minute just to wrap things up, but I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for your time, for all that you give, for the world that you are transforming in this simple practice, simple, not necessarily always easy, but simple practice of just healing our relationship with money. To those of you who are listening, who have listened to the podcast over and over again, and first of all, I thank you. If you like this podcast, I would invite you to go to Apple Podcasts and to like it, to write a review of it, to tell your friends about it, so that people can hear this message more. For those of you who want to know more about Sarah, I really recommend you go to sarahmccrum.com. Those are all going to be in the show notes down below. For those of you who want to know more about the Mosaic, you can go find me at danielbrucelevin.com, also in the show notes below, or themosaiconline.com. But in closing, what I'm always taken by is that life's sort of like a wheel. And if we find ourselves on the outside of the wheel at the rim, where all the problems are, where all the rim hits the road all the time. The faster we go, the more we experience the bumps. All we have to do is take any spoke in. And what I love about what Sarah's doing is who would think that money would be that spoke to bring you into a life that is rich and calm and pure and holy, really even holy. And I love what she's doing because it makes complete sense that it would be. But in all the people that work in the field of money, and there are millions of them, one of the things that I love about Sarah, it was the first thing I asked her, how are you different than all the other people? When we first sat down, because everybody's telling you how to invest and what portfolios you should get and how much of your money you should put aside and do that. That isn't what she's doing at all. What she's doing is say, if you would just develop a relationship with it like you develop a relationship with your wife or your husband, with your child, with your teacher, with your family, with anybody. Develop a relationship to it and listen. Like speak to it, but listen to it as well. What it might share with you might really change the way you live your life. And I don't know anybody on the planet that is doing that with money. And that, I think, is why Sarah is becoming this like explosion. And I want you to get involved in the explosiveness of it, because what would happen for you if your relationship with money was fabulous? How would that change every single aspect of your life? What if it was kind and gentle? What if it was powerful and strong? What if it enabled you to be able to do all the things you never thought you would be able to do? And I believe through the little bit of work that I'm doing with her so far, and which will continue for my life, that those things change the entire relationship I have with everything. And so I am so thankful to you, Sarah, for being here with us, for taking your time to share with the people that are part of this community. And for people that are part of this community, I can't recommend enough that you check her work out. If you do nothing more than just listen to what's in this podcast already, that first chapter, just let it talk to you, see what happens. Let it guide you. It'll tell you where to go from there. I thank you again, Sarah, for being part here with us. I thank you, listeners, for coming and giving of your valuable time to spend with us. And I look forward to the next time we get together, where we will explore some other incredible part of the universe, which is fabulous. Until then, thank you and blessings.